Everybody, welcome back. Episode 8 of the Fast Motor Podcast. I'm back, Elijah, my dad, Randy. Getting into the storylines of this week, starting, I'm going to start with kind of a tragic note down in Kennedale. Billy Hurt, who was a safety worker with the Outlaws down there, passed away after a couple of safety vehicles collided in the infield. So just want to start off offering prayers to his family, his friends, and just everybody that down there that witnessed that was around it. It was just a really sad deal. But they're going back racing this weekend. Kind of get to race in his honor, and the racing community will be pretty tight together for this one. So sad deal down there. In other Kennedale news, they did get their night one show done. David Gravel got the win. Bill Baylog looked like he had it kind of buttoned up and stumbled on the cushion late, and Gravel was able to slide in for the win there. Other wing sprint car stuff, high limit season kicked off. Got that on for them. Thursday, they kicked off. Kyle Larson narrowly wins. Corey Day was charging late. Larson held on. Friday, it was, as they've been saying, payday. Corey Day dominated on Friday. Got the lead pretty early from Aaron Reitzel and checked out. And then Saturday, Aaron Reitzel proved untouchable. He ran through. He was just super smooth, picked his way through traffic, and just really couldn't be caught. It looked like Thorson was kind of hitting the bottom there late. Was maybe getting a run at him, but Reitzel was just locked in. They were hooked up. Also in Vegas, the Ultimate Sprint Car Series. We had Melissa on last week. Brady Bacon, national guy coming in, racing for the Johnson family. He got the win in a really good race. There was a true top, a true bottom. It was a good battle. And then Friday, Ryan Bernal emerged to the top, and he kind of showed why he wins a lot of big West Coast sprint car races. Just solid, clean, smooth. CRA was also running. They were at Imperial Valley. Ricky Lewis swept the weekend for them Friday and Saturday. Saturday, a narrow margin. He ripped the top. AJ Bender had the lead and got barely a nose out in front of him. So it was a good race, good battle. The Western States Midgets joined them out at Imperial. And Drake Carty got his first victory in the 17 midget, which cool deal for him. He was pretty excited about it, as he should be. His first career win out there. Really awesome, really happy for him. And Saturday, CJ Sarna, a good friend, got a win, which had been, I saw USAC posted, like over 20 years since he won on pavement. So really cool for them. I know they got a new motor this year, and they've been dialing it in. So happy for him to get that win, see him back in victory lane. All those recent ones can be on Flow, the Outlaws obviously on Dirt Vision. And then switching over to some pavement stuff. Cars Tour West was at Kern, a really good battle there too. Jace Hansen got the win. Him and Harvick had a really good battle going late in the race, and Harvick inside 10 to go cut a tire down. Hansen was able to hold off Keelan Harvick. Both Harvicks were running on a late restart and get the win out there. Another one you can find on Flow. And then the ASA Stars had their second show of the year, and Carson Brown got it done at Five Flags. He has proven to be quite a talent. He won the Clyde Hart Memorial at New Smyrna to open the year, won the ARCA race at Phoenix, and now he's won the second ASA Stars race of the year down in Pensacola. So he's be a fun one to watch throughout the year, and that can be found on Track TV. Going over to the NASCAR stuff at Vegas. O'Reilly race had a lot of comers and goers, a lot of good battles. And Kyle Larson, who was complaining about the car and seemed rather shocked that they won at the end, both him and the crew chief. But he got it done at Vegas. They figured out a way to get themselves in a good position and took home the victory there. The Cup race, kind of similar story. You had guys that were really good on short runs, really good on long runs. And Denny Hamlin took the win, who looked like one of the short run guys, and they made some adjustments and ended up getting the win, and were able to hold off Chase Elliott there late. And then IndyCar down in Arlington, they had their race around the Cowboys Stadium and Ranger Stadium. Cool venue, cool event there. And Kyle Kirkwood, who has proved to be quite the ace on street courses. I think I saw something like 5 out of his 6 wins have been on street courses. He's pretty dang good, and going to a new track, and he was able to get the win. And so in terms of storylines of stuff that I kind of paid attention to this week. Oh, and then F1, Kimi Antonelli for Mercedes got the win. set a record for youngest in some time. I'm not really sure, Dad, if you know, you can chime in there, but Mercedes has brought some fast cars with this new build, because they've won both events with him and George Russell winning the first one. So yeah, Dad, if you got anything to add before we get our guest in here.
It's a lot. There's a lot of racing going on. So I don't know what you're going to do in a few weeks. I don't know how you're going to do it all.
Oh, yeah.
I think interesting storylines for me was, Corey Day, obviously can win in the sprint cars, obviously is a show to watch every time he's in a sprint car. But then that transition to stock cars, that is a lot. What you're trying to find in grip, how you're searching a track, Larson, I think everybody's forgotten how long it's taken Larson to even, appear, for years there. But I think what's most impressive is it looks like he listened. He's settling down. He's not pushing the issue. He's finishing races, and he's finished, top 5, top 10s, and knocking them off. And yes, he's in fantastic equipment, but there's a lot of good equipment. And so, I think it's just impressive that he's listening, and learning as he goes. And then just the amount of talent that you see with Carson Brown, and you see these young up and comers finding winning ways, and it's obviously it's what's good for the sport is to watch them come along. So it's sad, the tragedy that happened just really touches me, because growing up at Meridian Speedway, the safety crews there they'd just been there for years. They were just a part of the fabric of that community, and they're there, they dedicate their time. They're what make our sport so amazing, because there are people who love it and just invest in their own time and energy, and they're just kind of the unsung heroes behind it all that make it work. And to see somebody lose their life that way, it's just so incredibly tragic. And I think that the sport obviously honors those individuals really well, and hopefully, there's some things to try to help their family and some things that way. So
absolutely, very well said. I'll let you intro our guest now as we get ready to kick it off.
Yeah. So, Charles, I met him years ago when I first started in the truck series, and his involvement with Thor Sport and the kind of the Midwest short track scene at the time. And then, it really wasn't until Twitter or X that we kind of got back reacquainted. And I think it's just, we talk about what we want to see positive in the sport. And one, he has a positive mindset on the sport. He's always, he's seen everything. He's lived through probably the ups and downs of the sport. But, I think what I enjoy about him is he kind of sees, the new and the exciting, and sees it through those kind of lenses, which I like. And then also, his involvement, with the ARCA series and the ASA series, and seeing the young talent come along. And I think, as we continue to celebrate the sport, the young talent that's coming is coming in a fast way. Like, they'll find their way to the top quick. And, I think it'll be fun to hear his insights on that. So
absolutely. Welcome. So yeah, without further ado, Charles Krall, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. I hope I can live up to that introduction there, Randy. I'm listening to that going, wow, I've got him snowed. All right.
No. Are you able to talk about your handle on Twitter?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I don't know if you remember it, Elijah, but the orange cone.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's what, you truly are what I enjoyed about Twitter, because you had a little sarcasm. It was funny. You pulled the good, but you weren't the negative that we see in today's world, right? Like you didn't have to be negative to be funny. And I think that takes a real talent. And I just always appreciated it. And I didn't know it was you until, probably years later or years into it. So, I don't know how big that handle was at the time, but you had to have some fanfare around that.
It was really neat. Particularly in what I would call like the NASCAR Twitter heyday, to be included in some of those lists of the most influential Twitter accounts at the time, up with, the Danica Patricks and the Jimmy Johnsons of the world. I was like, I'm just some dude sitting on my couch in Ohio making sarcastic remarks and, during races. And, what I'd always say, I use that account as a way to kind of, it came at a time when I wasn't actively working in the sport and I was desperate. Maybe I shouldn't have been so desperate, but, desperate to stay involved and to have a voice and to feel like, my opinion was being heard. And, I found that, for whatever reason, this little talking traffic cone had some traction to it. And I said things that made me laugh and were of interest to me. And the fact that anybody else found any interest or humor in it was always just kind of like a really nice bonus. And the reality of it to me was, it opened a lot of doors to me to do some really, really cool things and meet a ton of really cool people. Just have made some lifelong friends. And got to do some just super cool experiences, getting to go to Texas Motor Speedway with, the humans behind the NASCAR Chasm account and the mini Chad and NASCAR Wonka. And they treated us like kings for 4 race weekends in a row down there. And it was just, I had never experienced anything like that. And, to be sitting on the couch watching the Daytona 500, making, sarcastic remarks. And then, there's a crash off of turn 4 and the orange cone goes flying and there's Mike Joy, saying, "Oh, there's our buddy, the orange cone flying." And my kids are sitting there right next to me going, "Oh my God, they're talking about Dad on the Daytona 500." It's just, it was just so amazing. And, it was a really great ride. And, I had so much fun doing it. I just, and a lot of times I wish we could kind of go back to, it was a much simpler time in my book. I wish we could rewind the clock on the social media experiment and go back to those simpler times. But I don't know. I don't know that we're going to get that toothpaste back in the tube on that one.
Yeah. It's, we started this because we wanted to get away from the downward spirals that you see on social, right? The clicks for, to grab the attention. And hey, we only have X amount of people watch this, and we could probably get pretty controversial and get the right thing said at the right time and probably, let it go. But we don't want, that's not what we want to do. We love the sport. Elijah's grown up in it from kind of afar, and just has such a passion for it. We want to find those nuggets that, for the younger generations to rally around and do it in a way that, we just want to talk. Last week, Melissa talked about developing the USCS series, and she said she did it because she just wanted to be around her friends at the racetrack. And it's kind of what we do. Like, it's like, let's just chat. Like, let's chat about the sport. Like, when we saw you at Irwindale, we just talk about all the things. And, you can't do that. We've learned really quick. It's hard to do that in an hour. So, we'll have to have you back because there's no way we're getting through everything. But, and you did that in a way. And there's a couple handles that do it really well. And there's some that want to stir the pot. And, I'm sure they probably get their clicks because of it. And there's people who enjoy that too. Like, I think that, there's people who enjoy it all the way around, not just, an account that stirs the pot, but the people who like to just make the jokes and go, that's what they love. And I guess that's good that they're interested in the sport and that's what they want to do. So, I don't know that it's all negative. It's part of their game. I don't even think they're negative about it. It's their game to be that way. So, so tell us a little bit about your involvement in the series, and what you're doing and how things are transpiring that way.
Well, I'm really fortunate. I'm one of the few people in life who have ended up exactly where they really would have liked to have ended up. I grew up going to the racetrack with my grandparents. My grandparents were officials with ARCA back in the 1960s, prior to my arrival on this earth. Back in the early 60s, they were officials with ARCA in ARCA's early days. And when my mom was pregnant with me, she was selling programs at Toledo Speedway. And it just was one of those things that when I was a child, I would come to the racetrack with my grandparents, and, I was around the Markhams and the Dragers, and, and then through other family involvement, my uncle Bill Gardner was a very successful NASCAR team owner, won the Daytona 500, won the Cup Series championship. So I had racing, on the brain, just like Elijah did. I grew up in it, maybe an arm's length away from it, but it was something I always wanted to do. Went to college and got a degree to be a PR rep somewhere. And was really fortunate to latch on to what was then Sealmaster Racing here in Sandusky. And this was, the team that is now known as ThorSport. Was probably in their early days. They had some success, but not a lot. We were at that point, struggling for sponsorship. The Menards deal hadn't happened yet, and they hadn't really, found their groove with Matt Crafton. Matt was there in his early years, after Terry Cook had left. And, I had bounced in and out of that program for a couple of years. And, it was very, eye-opening. And, I learned a lot. I learned I did not know anything as far as like how the sport actually worked. But, it was a lot of fun. It allowed me to kind of get my feet in. And as I like to tell people, once you're in the club, you're in, man. If once you're here and you're established, people will find a reason to keep you around. And I was really fortunate that, Duke had, even though I had kind of departed a couple of times, he always would find a way to bring me back and kind of help keep me in the game. And right around 2008, I'd had a daughter in 2003 and had twin sons in 2008. And, the family situation was such that it was a little more important for me to be home than out traveling around the country. So I stepped away from traveling with the truck series each and every week, but was really lucky to latch on to a local radio station here that broadcast 4 or 5 ARCA races a year, some of the local races around here. And, when that deal kind of came to an end, ARCA asked me if I would be willing to do internet radio for some of their races that weren't on TV. I was like, yeah, absolutely. And as, more and more of their races were being televised, the need for me to come to the races was slowly waning away. And eventually it got to a point where I was maybe doing 1 or 2 races a year. And then, Don Radebaugh, who had been with ARCA for a long time, 15, 16, 17 years, Don had decided he was ready to retire. And I saw he had made a post that it was his last day at ARCA. And I was like, hello, I would like to have that job. And, I was really fortunate, right place, right time. And I've been there ever since. And it's such a treat because I get a chance to go to a lot of the same racetracks I got to go to when I was a kid, races here at Toledo and Flat Rock, where I literally grew up at those racetracks, Michigan, a lot of the cool short tracks like Berlin and Salem, and, get to go to places like Daytona and Talladega and see, as you guys have alluded to, some of the up and coming drivers that are going to be making noise for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
Drivers like Chase Briscoe, I got to work with Chase Briscoe when he was a rookie and was a champion. And, Jesse Love is another guy, and Jesse's going to be around for the next 25, 30 years. I was there when he won his first West race out at Utah Motorsports campus when he was just barely 15 years old. It's so cool to have a chance to work with some of these youngsters and be able to kind of, some of these young kids that you can tell right out of the box, these guys have it.
Yeah. Elijah and I were talking a little bit about, the topics, right? We want to kind of dig into with the talents that we bring on. What are the positives of the young talent that you see, not just their talent, but like, they come in very differently, coming in at 15, where I remember being 21 and no one wanted to hire me because I was too young. So, that's just changed a great deal. And what are the positives of that? Like, and then what do you miss about the old guard when it was the Butch Millers and the Terry Cooks that had, went through the Midwest, just grinding it out, Tony Raines and, the list goes on and on of those early truck days of the guys through the Midwest that had just ground it out. And then finally the trucks appeared and they had an opportunity. So what do you see now, in this young talent? What is it in there for the fans that's exciting because of that?
So it's to me, the interesting part is that these kids are so talented, and even a 15-year-old like a Tristan McKee, who we'll see a lot of this year. Tristan, although he's just barely 15 years old, he's been racing for probably 11 years, and when you look back at comparatively how it was for the Butch Millers and the Terry Cooks and the Bob Keselowskis of the world, it was kind of the same thing back then. It was just they were racing street stocks and sportsman cars, and then they moved into late models, and then they moved on to trucks. Well, these kids now are starting racing, karts and legends cars and bandoleros, and then they move into a limited late model or a late model, and then they're ready to go ARCA racing by the time they're 15. It's just a little bit different. The downside to it is that they don't have the fan base that a guy like Butch Miller had. Butch had a huge fan base. Yourself, you had a huge fan base from your days on Thunder. Like, you were an established name when you got to hop into that truck behind you there, and people knew who you were. The downside is there's not a lot of you have to really be paying attention to know who Tristan McKee is right now. But the upside to it is if you come to, let's say, the race at Toledo Speedway in May, you're going to get a chance to see Tristan McKee before he becomes the next Chase Briscoe or the next Jesse Love. And that's kind of how we position it. And that's how we sell tickets to our fans is you are literally looking at NASCAR's stars of tomorrow, and you're going to have a chance to go right out onto the racetrack, get your picture taken with them, get an autograph with them, spend a little bit of time. And for the drivers, it's a very low pressure environment, right? Yeah. You don't have the bright spotlight that you're going to have on Sunday in a cup race or even in an O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race. Yeah. It's the pressure is so much lower. The stakes are lower. The crowds are lower. Still nationally televised, which is great. You're going to get to have some exposure, and the people who need to see you that are making decisions for those Cup teams and those O'Reilly Auto Parts teams are going to be able to watch those races that you're in. But it's in a much lower pressure environment. I heard you guys talking about Corey Day earlier, and Corey is to me a very interesting kind of case study. Because as he is making this transition from the sprint car world to the stock car world, Corey's a guy who's going to have some success, no doubt about it. Yeah. He's with the best team in all of stock car racing to do it. it's interesting that the path that they put him on. I personally, just of course, I'm ultra biased. I would have liked to have seen him run a few more ARCA races before we put him in a full-time O'Reilly Series race, because I think some of the mistakes that he's made, particularly this year, I think he would have learned not to make those mistakes in an ARCA race at Kansas.
Do you think some of that is, one, they probably want to control as much of his destiny as they can, and they don't have, you haven't yet seen the teams establish the foundation down there, right. And I even think back to the truck days, right? Childress had a truck, Petty had a truck, Hendrick had a truck, Roush had multiple trucks. They began to start investing there. I'm sure they were, kind of nudged by NASCAR to build trucks, so it helped the series, but it also was a proving ground, where, even though that talent had developed, I mean, all the guys that drove those vehicles, I looked back at an older Nashville race, not the one that I won, and man, we beat and banged all night, and yet none of them were a caution. Right. You just knew that level, and those guys were just so good at it. But do you see that? Do you begin to see that trend where Gibbs has had an ARCA car, because of Toyota, and seeing this transition with Corey, even though he's running top 5s and top 10s and he's doing well, where you could spend a year that way with somebody. And they might have him on a very fast track because of, a seat that's going to open or something, who knows what. But, do you see teams going that way? I know Nitro now owns I don't know how many cars with them buying Venturini, but yeah. But do you see any signs of that, you think?
Yeah, I mean, the JGR model is pretty solid right now. Right. That's exactly what they're doing, and and Hendrick has alliances with the Pinnacle Racing Group team.
Okay,
those alliances are there. And obviously you've seen the Nitro drivers have moved, up that ladder, fairly efficiently. I do. I just think it's a much lower pressure, lower stakes place to come and learn.
Yeah.
And when you make those mistakes, and by all accounts, Corey Day is an extraordinarily talented young race car driver. Like this, I'm not in any way taking a poke at him and saying, "Hey, you're screwing up and you shouldn't be there." Not at all. I'm just saying, the fact that he's doing this learning in a series that's a lot more intense, and maybe that's by design. Maybe they're like, "Hey, we're going to put you here so you can learn in a rapid rate in a very intense environment." Perhaps I couldn't argue with that. That philosophy.
I can't argue with the heads of state over there. Obviously
they go into a place like Kansas or Michigan or Chicagoland, in an ARCA field and learning how to run a big 1.5-mile racetrack, and you're not going to have to compete with 20 or 25 other ultra competitive teams, but you are going to have to compete with the Nitros and the Joe Gibbses of the world, and you're still going to have to figure out a way to win. That's just my personal philosophy, and I will tell you, and I'm going to brag on the ARCA platform here just for a moment. 80% of the drivers who run in the national series, whether it's the Craftsman Trucks or the O'Reilly Auto Parts series or the Cup series, 80% on any given weekend are ARCA platform graduates. So I think the numbers back up the fact that this is a great place to come and learn and get it done.
Well, it's certainly, I mean, these last few years have really, it always had its place, with the Frank Kimmels of the world and all of that, it had its place, but it feels like it's became more of that stepping stone in just this last decade, right? You say the chases, all of them have came through that pathway now, which is, that's what our country doesn't have. And when I talk about our country, it's like, you haven't had a normal progression path. Until the trucks, there was no hope for us. Like there was just no hope for Mike Bliss or Kenny Irwin wouldn't have had a shot. Like none of us would have made it. Gordon, who knows what, Gordon had Thursday Night Thunder and he's the first one to kind of jump in, but without the trucks, there was only so many seats. So, what I like about it is it's another, 20, 30 seats that are available to see who then can progress to the next level instead of, okay, we've got 90 seats available in the top 3. And if you're not one of those guys, you're just out. And I think that is my thing would be the negative would be the young is they feel like they have a limited window and then they're kind of done instead of, I don't know. I just miss the stories of hearing Hornaday grind it out or Stefanik, or, all of those, those characters that you got because they kind of honed their skills. So
Jimmy Hensley, some of those guys that we never would have got to see on the national stage and in the formation of the truck series, it gave that. I mean, and honestly, a guy like Matt Crafton, and I know Matt is in his first year of, semi-retirement from the truck series. And, he had a career for 25 years that would not have been there if not for the truck series. And I got to tell you, that's why I'm wearing my ASA hoodie tonight. I'll get the logo up there. That's why I like the ASA Stars National Tour right now, because there are guys like Stephen Nasse and Bubba Pollard who are just hardcore short track racers, and that's what they want to do. There's no illusions that they're going to go and hop in a truck or an O'Reilly Auto Parts car. They want to be racing those late models and winning those races. And that's the kind of guys I like right there is true short track racers, and that's what they want to be doing. And I'm thrilled to be a part of that too. And not only that, you still get to see the Carson Browns and the Jade Abadizians of the world there too.
Absolutely. I think it's fun to watch both because you see the progressors and you also see the established. Like that ASA tour is for me, because I hear about all these truck series glory days. I didn't get to watch them. I've watched most of them on YouTube, but I didn't get to watch them live. And that ASA Stars series kind of is my most modern representation of it, because you've got the Bubba Pollards, the Stephen Nasses, even the Time Majeski's, who does have a full-time truck ride, but you've got these guys that have been racing super late models at such a high level for so long. But then you also have these kids that are trying to go further than that, like the Browns, the Avadizians, and all that stuff. I wanted to get your take on, as we talk about like kind of the ARCA field and the progression. So much chatter and it's always a topic of conversation, and it's something that people love to complain about, but it's just the reality is, you're going to progress with whoever's got the biggest checkbook. Right. Talk about that a little bit from the ARCA standpoint, because you see these kids and you're like, oh, that kid just has money, so he's going to make it. Like a Tristan McKee, for example. Kid's a super talented race car driver. I don't hear a whole lot of kids with that kind of money that don't also produce some results to back it up. So I wanted to see if you could kind of touch to that a little bit.
Yeah, I've been around long enough, sadly, I've been around long enough to know that's how it's always been, man. Mm-hmm. Whether I was going to a local late model race at Flat Rock Speedway when I was 10 years old, or an Iceman Supercar Series late model race at Toledo Speedway in the mid 1990s, or an ASA race, it was always those guys who had money were the ones who tended to run the best. That was just how it is, man. My early days in the truck series, it was the Hendricks and the RCRs and the Roush Racings. Those were the ones that set the bar. And then, the Impact Motorsports and the Sealmaster Racings of the world, who were trying to get to that kind of the B level tier, they were kind of racing for the scraps and hoping that someday they could progress to be at the top of the heap. And that's just how it is. And It's the same way in the ARCA world right now, right? Joe Gibbs Racing and Pinnacle and Nitro, those are the established teams, and those are the ones who are going to run up front every week. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
But we do every now and then we will see a team that can, on the right day, take it to them, particularly at a place like a Daytona or a Talladega, or, you know, the short tracks like an Elko or something like that, where, you know, handling and you know, getting your tires to last for 250 laps are way more important than aerodynamics and horsepower. You know, you are able to see some of these smaller teams go out there and compete. That's just how it is, and it's how it has always been. You know, I think Frank Kimmel will tell you, you know, when he was having that incredible streak of success back in the 90s and early 2000s, his team had a pretty healthy budget. You know, it wasn't like a Cup Series budget by any stretch of the imagination, but, you know, they had access to some funding that allowed them to, you know, keep their equipment fresh enough to go out there and compete to win every week. Bill Baird, same thing when he was the champion back in 1999. He had a healthy budget and was able to come and do it. That's the old adage, money buys speed. How fast do you want to go, right? And you know, the one downside, and that, Randy, I know you asked me this a little bit ago. The one downside to this youth movement is that some of these kids, and this is no knock on them. This is just the world that they were born into and the life that they live. But some of these kids haven't ever had a regular job, you know, whereas Randy, you yourself, a guy like the late Greg Biffle, even Kurt Busch. Kurt had to work a regular job at some point in his life to help finance the race program. And I think that's where we were able to connect with drivers like that as race fans. Like, I'm just an average guy, you know, I work a regular job, and I see somebody out there who like a Ron Hornaday, who by all metrics, Ron's just a regular dude, man. He was lucky enough to be able to do some pretty extraordinary stuff, but he's just an ordinary guy. And Bobby Allison was a regular guy who got to do some really cool things.
Yeah, you go back in the era of even guys, right? Like, I think that's probably, if I could help the young drivers relate to the older fan, because we're at a really funny crossroads, right? We're really young drivers with a fairly old,
right?
And so the connection for me is, hey, I don't care how you got there. Be appreciative that you got there.
Right.
It's when I see the entitlement that not that you didn't earn it, because I think they all earn it in very different ways. Like, the kids are driving 100 races a year now because they can afford to, but they're driving 100 races a year. That's not easy. I don't care if you're in a motor coach. I don't care, like, whatever. That's a lot. So, but it's when they don't hang around for the fans, or they don't do this. And I don't think you see that with, we were around the ARCA stuff, and everybody was very approachable, very pleasant to be. Like, they were willing to spend time with you. Like, it was wonderful. So I think you have it. I kind of go back to some of the open wheel stuff we're around. They're loaded up and gone by the time the race is over.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like that, we talk, and if you've listened to any of it, Meridian Speedway, the track I grew up on, they have what's called Party in the Pits. They try to get their show over by 9 to 9:30 at night, and they run it a tight ship, because then they open the garage area and they don't allow anybody to leave. Because it's too dangerous, because it's too small. So you're not allowed to go. And so everybody comes down, and they're around the cars, and there's autograph cards, and there's candy for the kids. And it's just like, it has an energy unlike any racetrack I've ever been to after the races are over. But you get to meet somebody, and then you pull for them the next time, and then you come out, and it builds that. And that part, I don't feel is there. The kids take their suits off. Gosh, I remember we would keep our suits on, right? Because those were the sponsors you were proud of. And now, they're quickly into shorts and they're in gear. Like, when you're wearing a suit, you're Superman.
Superman. I was going to say,
like, you were one that now when you put on shorts and a t-shirt, you look like every Joe Blow here, where like when you're wearing that to a little kid, you're somebody special. I mean, I watched Elijah. I don't care if the guy drove, a 50-year-old street stock that has been beat up for 20 years. Like, to him, that guy wore, a driver's suit and was a hero.
yep.
And so to, do that, I think that I wish we could help some of them. And I wish we could help some of them on their social. I wish we could help them tell their stories in a way, because they have stories. Like, you think of Keelan and going overseas and racing karts and being in a foreign country. And I mean, even though he's with the top team, he's like he's not living the childhood where he's in school and building friendships. Like, his friendships are built in a whole different way. Like, his story, by the time he gets, in a couple of years in trucks or ARCA or whatever that is, like, he has quite a story. That's not just Kevin Harvick's son. I mean, Kevin Harvick's, provided this opportunity, but man, he's going to have just an interesting story if you could get those nuggets about what it was to go race in Europe in karts. They don't do much with Connor Zilic even to talk about all that he did and who he raced against that's in Formula One now, or, he probably raced against Kimi.
Right. Absolutely. I can remember when I was a kid, that was the Lake Speed story. He was a world karting champion who raced against Eric Senna and beat him. That's a cool story, and there's great stories like that. The Connor Zilic story has yet to be told. And I think that's a really interesting one. And of course, you've got Jesse Love and Brent Cruz, who are right there with him, throughout most of that story. And, we're going to love hearing that story be told as these drivers continue to climb that ladder and join Connor in the Cup Series over the course of the next couple of years. And that's the one thing that we really, we try to help these young drivers with. We do an online marketing and PR seminar with the teams every February prior to Daytona. And we try to let them know, if there's something interesting that you want us to know, please tell us. We won't share it until you tell us to, but we want to help tell your story. And there are so many interesting things. Even a 15-year-old kid who's making his debut, like Tristan McKee, when he was 15, there's a backstory there that needs to be told, and we want to tell it. I will always, getting to the other point that you were talking about there, I'll always tell these young drivers, the people that are here to see you, the more time you are able to spend with them, they're going to buy t-shirts at some point. If you make a positive impression with them, they're going to buy your merch, man. They're going to be buying hats and t-shirts and jackets, and, go spend some time with them now. Build that relationship with them when you're 15 or 16 years old. Because if you're going to be around for 20 years, they will spend a lot of money on your merch, man. And it's never too early to start building those relationships with the fans.
Yeah. There's nothing cooler than seeing your merch on somebody that you don't know.
Absolutely. I remember the first time I saw somebody wearing an orange cone t-shirt at the racetrack. I was like, that is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Believe it.
Yeah. It's awesome because like Dad was alluding to, like, those drivers to me when I was a kid, like, they were the coolest people in the world. Like, they were just larger than life because they had a fire suit and a race car. And hey, here's an autograph card, or hey, here's a sign your program or your checkered flag or your t-shirt or whatever it is. And it was like, I'd remember that forever. And I'd show and tell my friends about it and be like, I went to the races this weekend and this is the t-shirt that I got. And this guy sold it to me or gave it to me. I don't know how many of those shirts that I got to wear were free or not. I didn't say that. But then
we're going a little quarter-mile Flat Rock Speedway. It's south of Detroit. And you'd see these drivers walking from the pits up into the grandstands. And I'm a 10-year-old kid and I'm just like, oh my God, it's, race car drivers. It is. It's like that is such a perfect analogy. You've got your uniform on at the racetrack. You are like Superman to those little kids, and you should do it. You should find, if you are a local driver or a young up and coming driver running an ASA Stars race or an ARCA race somewhere, you absolutely should throw your suit on and go walk over into the crowd for a half an hour. I mean, you want a ego boost right there? They will give you an ego boost, man. They will absolutely treat you like you are a superstar. And I still think it's cool, man. I'm 53 years old and I still get blown away by these kids walking around, race car drivers.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're just we love watching them do what they do, and for them, it's their, especially these kids so young, it's become their job. Like, it's just their life. It's just what they do. But like, we love watching what they do. Like, they're artists. They're wrestling these machines. Like, it's awesome. Everything about it is just awesome.
Everything about it is awesome. It is, man. There's not a single thing about it. That's why, my son has been fortunate enough to race my stepfather's little street stock car. They're going to go and run Eldora later on in the year. And I'm like, dude, I'm just blown away at the skill and the bravery that it takes to go and do that. And, those of us who are on the inside, and I've been very fortunate, I'm almost 30 years into my career. We kind of take it for granted, Randy, that guys like you are that brave and that skilled and that talented to go and do it. It's when you think about hauling off into a corner at 180 miles an hour and you don't know whether or not you're going to bust your ass or you're going to make it to the other side.
There's a great memory for me of Darlington, which Elijah and I are going for the NASCAR alumni weekend this weekend. And I remember being there the first time, and I think I was just there watching. And Mark Martin, you just wore tires out so bad at Darlington, especially then, that I remember being in the Winn-Dixie number 60 for Roush. And I remember hearing a car fire up and just wide open. And that thing, he went into turn one all the way up against the wall, and he was the only car on the track for the very first practice. And just, I'll never forget, like, it was a qualifying lap and he hadn't been on that track before, that day. And it was like, it was just a really awe moment for me to think of that. And I was a driver, racing in the truck series, but I was like, wow, I don't know if I can do that. But it was that skill, when you just said that, it just, there was such a time, people ask me all the time what I miss. And I say, regarding business, I miss the checkered flag because I miss the opportunity to know exactly where you stand. In business, you don't know if you got the checkered flag or you finished fifth most of the time. You kind of did your job that day. And, Elijah coaches baseball, and did he really have an impact? Was that a winning day or was it just a mediocre day? And you also don't have time to regroup. The checkered flag gave you time to regroup for the next one. So what did we do wrong? There's just a pause. Let's do better. You hire everybody for the team to make it better, not, just to fulfill a job role. And then, the season ending, you have all the optimism of what it is. So I miss that, but I also miss sliding that leg over, strapping into that thing, the seat that fits like a glove, the way you put your gloves on, the way you strap your helmet on, and attaching yourself to that machine, and then just manhandling it, finding how to get grip, adjusting your racing line. I don't know that there's anything like it for me that I've ever had that goes, you're by yourself, no matter radio spotters, whatever, you're the one trying to find that delicate balance of grip and speed. And your son feels the same, on whatever level that is. It doesn't mean you don't have to be at a NASCAR level to do that. That's whatever level that is.
And I tell people all the time, it doesn't matter what division you're racing in. It could be the lowest hobby stock level division. It could be Formula One or anything in between. every race is hard to win. It does not matter if it's an 8-lap heat race, a 4-lap trophy dash, or the little 500, the Daytona 500. Every race is hard to win. And if you can win any of them, you've done something.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I drove Terry Cook's motorhome to the first Truck Series race at Darlington and made a lap around the racetrack in 30 miles an hour, Randy. And I was terrified to be on the banking at 30 miles an hour. You guys are nuts going around that place.
I'd rather go there at 180 than I would 30 in a motorhome, I think. So.
I wasn't brave enough to do the motorhome. This was just in a Ford Focus. But I was like, you guys, you people are crazy. There's no way you could go 160 miles an hour around.
I wished, there's been so much commentary about Darlington and, the lady in black, and there's this and this. Anytime that I speak, I ask how many people enjoy the sport, and, you get a random group of hands. And then I say, let me tell you about a lap at Darlington and driving that, because there's times that you can't see anything but asphalt. Like you can't see the corner of exit 2. Like you are in the banking, the rocks up against in the wheel wells, the air that keeps you from hitting it, and you're just wide open. And like it's such an amazing place to drive. There's no place like it. And it's just, I wish they could, I wished Hollywood could write scripts that would grab the true romance of what racing is, of how it feels to be in that car, what you're feeling, that, when you talk about the pressures in the lower environment of ARCA, I don't think the fan realizes every race is a debut for that talent. Like every kid that's in that car is concerned about the next one, that if they get to do it again. I mean, every race is an audition. Every race is an audition, because even though many of them have money and many of them maybe can afford the ARCA thing, maybe they can even afford the truck thing, but can they afford the O'Reilly? And they can't probably afford the Cup. They're going to need that talent is going to need to, buy that next check or buy that next opportunity at some point. And that's an immense amount of pressure.
And I think that's why we see the rush, honestly, Randy, is say you come from a family that has the means to do this. Even still, it's expensive enough that there's a limited amount of funds that someone's dad is going to be willing to spend on something that may or may not work out. So I think once that young driver shows a little propensity to do it at the ARCA level, they're not going to stick around to hone their skill. They're gonna make that next step as quickly as they can, because I think whether it's dad or whoever the benefactor is, they're looking to get from the I'm willing to make this investment to I would like that return on this investment to happen.
Or at least not to be losing any more.
Right. So that's the one thing that I think I would love to be able to do and I don't have the ability to do this, of course, but I would love to be able to kind of take some of that pressure off of the benefactors, so to speak, and maybe take the rush out of some of those youngsters. We do have, like Keelan. Keelan is 13 years old. I don't even know if he's even 13 years old. He's 12 or 13. And it seems like they've got him on a pretty fast track. And I would just say there's no need to rush that. There's going to be a Daytona 500 in 2032, just like there will be in 2029. There's no real rush. Let these kids learn at their pace, and when they're ready, let's make that leap. I think we've seen a lot of drivers, as you have alluded to, make that leap up, and they weren't quite ready. And rather than making that step back and taking the time to learn, they're just done. And I
it's
like that.
That's very interesting too. And I know, you know, and I don't know all the insights, but I do know, you know, Toyota at times has tried to slow some of that down. Like, we only have so many seats. You're going to have to spend their time, and drivers get itchy and make a jump and leave that. And I've seen a lot of careers go backwards because they jumped out of that supply chain where you didn't have to have money, right? You know, or you had some, but it was, you know, supplemented or whatever that might be. But, you know, there's only so many seats at the top. And that's the only other thing that I see that we're at a little bit of a crossroads with the sport is young, you know, fast. But now we have a younger generation that's driving. They're not all 45 and getting out. They're in their mid 30s. They're not ready to leave. Right. And so then what happens? You know, there's only so many cars on their track. Like, we're seeing some of that. You know, we're starting to see some of that with the, you know, Corey Himes or the whoever. It's like there's only X amount of good, you know, good seats. There's more better seats than there's ever been as far as really good teams, but there's only so many of those, and you're gonna have to wait for somebody to leave, and that's okay. Like, it's amazing to me, you know, you hear somebody talk about, well, they've been in O'Reilly now 3 years. Wow. Let's talk to Sam Ard from back in the day. You know, those guys lived in those series.
Jason Keller, right?
Right. Yeah, Jason Keller. And, you know, because there wasn't a better program to go to. You know, they weren't going to get a winning car, and so they would rather win. They would rather stay where they would win and
Randy
at least be the hero on Saturday. I don't know if that's the case with all those guys, but, you know, I do know, being around individuals, to say, is this the wise choice? I'm winning here, but the car I'm going to go to is maybe not. That could be a career-ending choice.
I mean, think about a guy like Todd Bodine, who, you know, by all accounts is a really excellent race car driver, but never had that opportunity in a really solid top line cup car. And, you know, he had bounced around and got bounced out of the sport, and then found a home in the truck series and became a multiple time champion. And we're gonna know that name, Todd Bodine's name, for years and years and years, because he took the step back.
Yeah.
Rather than being the guy that finished 25th on Sunday, he was the guy who finished first on Friday, and we'll remember him forever. I mean, Jason Keller is another great name of a guy who made a career in the AAA level, and probably was never going to get that opportunity. And I mean, obviously didn't get that opportunity to have a Hendrick ride or an RCR ride, but boy, he sure made every opportunity he had in that AAA level pay off for him. And, you know, to me, that's okay. I would much rather have the career that Johnny Sauter had than be a guy that, you know, finished 27th every week on Sunday. You know, that's just me.
Even think about it. You know, a baseball team has more people on it than one baseball team in the MLB has more players than the entire Cup field.
Right. Right.
Well,
yes. What's that?
They have the 40-man roster, but I think 26 travel.
Yeah, but pretty close, right? You're getting pretty specific on me there.
I'm baseball. I mean, that was my
he knows.
But, you know, you think of that, right? Like, so if you're in the O'Reilly series, you're pretty elite. I had a statistician do it when I made it in the truck series, and he loves the numbers. So he did all the variables, and he was a statistician from the think tank, and it's my cousin Todd. And he's just a brilliant mind in the insurance game and all of that. And so it was something 8 million to 1 for me to get into the truck series. So I was thankful of my lucky stars that I ever got those opportunities, you know, to do what I did. Racing against who I got to race against, for sure. Like, you know, the amazing talents, and they're all that good. And now you're seeing that young talent come up that's just, gosh, to see how well and fast they adapt. I think that's just what's so impressive.
That's amazing.
How quick they are to understand the sport all the way around, you know, they just have no fear to go in there and race with the best of the best. You know, if it's in the ARCA series, like, you know, like Keelan or whoever, or, you know, or Tristan or whoever, like to sit on the pole, to win a race, to go to the ARCA race at Phoenix and sit on the pole and win. You know, that's pretty remarkable that those kids are doing that so fast.
And I think one of the things is they don't know what they don't know. You know, that's, you know, they don't have anything to unlearn. So they can just go out there and be fast, man.
Yeah.
And that's the old Junior Johnson. You know, it's a lot easier to slow somebody down than it is to speed them up. And these guys, these 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, they don't know anything but flat out.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's like a Jesse Love. You know, Jesse was so fast right out of the box. He started winning races immediately. And he had, they haven't figured out a way to slow him down yet, you know, and that's what's been so much fun to see. And, you know, he's one of those guys that you just knew, you know, there's something special about this kid. And, you know, to me, that's the most fun part of my job, is to get to see these just incredible, talented teenagers, and they're growing up into young men. And, you know, just it's almost like you're a high school teacher almost. You know, you're seeing these kids from the time they're little, you know, 13-year-old freshmen till they graduate as 18-year-old, you know, young men. And it's kind of what we do at the ARCA level, is we take these kids as the little freshmen, and by the time they're done and they're ready to move up into a truck, they're kind of like that 17, 18-year-old senior.
You know, I think my favorite thing about this conversation is it's easy to hear your excitement for those drivers. No, I mean, that's really true. Like you are that coach. You're proud of that talent that's coming along, and you speak of it in a way that's exciting and fun. And it makes me, you know, we're doing this because we love the sport. But I have to say, listening to Melissa last week, hearing Ron Green kind of defend some things a few weeks ago, hearing your excitement for the young talent makes me excited for the sport again, like more so. And because I have to say, you know, you get on social media, it wears you down, and I'm not around it day in and day out. So I see it on TV and I watch from afar, but I'm not there. I'm not living it. And you start losing your appreciation. And since we've done this broadcast, bringing on the diverse group of people that we have, from the short track racers to those involved in national series, those that have been involved in the past, like everybody's passion is making me excited for it again, and excited for the future. More importantly, that it hasn't lost its way, that it is bright, and the future's wonderful. So thank you for that. And I hope you maintain that. I hope ARCA keeps you in that role to where you tell that story, because race fans need to be told that story, that the young talent that's coming up is incredibly good. And it's not just the wealthy, it's the talented. And they've probably got more experience at 15 than half of us did at 27, 28 years old. They've ran more races. They've seen more. They've raced on different types of tracks and circuits. And they're coming with so much wisdom and knowledge behind the wheel that it takes good mentors like you to help them outside the wheel, you know, from when they're behind it. But thank you for that.
No, I thank you for allowing me to come and share my enthusiasm. I tell people I am literally the luckiest guy. You know, I get to come and I'm a paid spectator. I get to come and watch these races, and I get to come and hang out with these young kids, and every week I get to go to Victory Lane. You know, I'm around these guys when they're at their happiest. Yeah. You know, and I get to help them get on television to talk about a really good day. I can kind of help guide them when they haven't had such a really good day. And I'm as a race fan, first and foremost, you know, this is a fun job for me to be able to get to spend time with these young kids. And that's the one thing that I was always really kind of leery about, was you hear about the folks who get involved and it becomes a job, and it loses its luster, and it hasn't gotten to be that way for me. It never was. Even in some of those long nights at old Sealmaster Racing when we were trying to figure out a way to keep the lights on in January and didn't know if we were going to go to the test in Daytona, and it was still fun. I was still I knew I was lucky to be able to do it. Just like you mentioned the 1 in 8 million. I knew that there were 10,000 people who would trade places with me in a heartbeat if they could, and I still feel that way. I'm the lucky guy who gets to come and do this. And I know if for some reason I didn't want to do this anymore, there'd be a line outside the door ready to replace me. And I don't want to lose that enthusiasm for it. And when it does start to feel like it's becoming a job, maybe it's time for me to start thinking about, sitting and relaxing in this wonderful home that my wife has allowed me to live in with her. And, but yeah, man, this is so cool to get to come to the racetrack every weekend, man. I spent thousands of dollars buying tickets to go to these races over the years, man. I can't believe they paid me to come and do this now.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's pretty good.
That's awesome. Well, it's been wonderful having you, and we'll have you back for sure. Because
I can't wait.
If you want
to bring your camera to an ARCA race, buddy, you just let me know. We'll make it happen.
I will definitely take you up on that.
Let's do it.
Before we let you go, Elijah has some rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
We're asking to every guest so we can kind of see who likes what and what their personalities are like. So, favorite track?
My favorite track. So I'm going to be biased towards my 2 home tracks, Flat Rock and Toledo. But I'm going to put Eldora right there at the top of the list too. Eldora Speedway is one of the ultimate racetracks in the entire world, if you ask me. Yeah.
There you go. Again, everybody just says racetracks that are on my bucket list.
That's right.
Now that I'm not playing baseball, I have time. So those will
right. That's right. You got to get there, bud.
Yep. Most memorable race that you've watched?
So probably my favorite race, the 1994 Glass City 300 ASA race at Toledo Speedway, came down to a final lap battle between Jay Sauter and Butch Miller. Butch was the hometown favorite. He had raced at Toledo Speedway for years and years and years. Jay had gotten into a little scuffle with Dave Senziba earlier in the race, and Dave ended up in the outside wall. And Butch saw that happen, and he just kind of said, Jay is not going to win today. And he moved Jay on the final corner of the final lap, and the hometown crowd just went crazy. It was one of the most exciting races I've ever been part of. Yeah.
Those are some names to get to watch. Those are pretty
right.
Good.
Right.
I have a little Butch Miller ASA diecast car now. So.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Your racing hero growing up?
Bobby Allison. Yeah, drove for my Uncle Bill back in the day. I remember going to Victory Lane at Michigan back in 1982. I had a broken arm. I had fallen off of my neighbor's porch and broke my arm, and I'm wearing a sling in Victory Lane. And my family was trying to coax me into going and standing next to him when he was doing his interview for TV, and I was just way too terrified to do it. But after the interview wrapped up, and Bobby's walking around Victory Lane and accepting all the congratulations from everybody, comes over to me and he sees I've got a broken arm, and he says, "What's the matter with you, kid? Your girlfriend beat you up?" I was just like, "Oh, come on, man!" But he was one of those larger than life guys, and I just always loved Bobby Allison. Always.
Good one. That's a good one. That's a good story too.
Heck yeah.
Best track food.
I'm sure my boss Ron Traeger would like to say Toledo Speedway, and I'm again biased, but I'm going to go back to the pizza burger at Eldora Speedway. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Shane Carson said the same.
Yes, sir. Good stuff.
Your favorite current series to watch? You can't say ARCA or the ASA.
Boy, that's tough, because obviously I'm a NASCAR guy at heart. I'm a huge Truck Series fan. But I find myself really enjoying IndyCar races lately. Just the mix of the tracks, the mix of the drivers has been a lot of fun to see. But I got my true start working in the truck series, and I still look forward to those truck races every week, man. Every week.
I really especially like the truck series this year because you've got some guys that I've watched come up through the scene, like a Butterbean, maybe Krall, like those guys that came up through the Cars Tour. Like, I'm excited to see what those guys can do. So I've been really excited for the truck stuff.
Yeah, that truck field is stacked this year.
Yeah, they've got a good field. So, let's see, your ultimate goal in racing.
I alluded to this earlier. I think I've reached it. I am working in the job that I dreamed of doing when I was in college. I'm super fortunate to be able to do the play-by-play for the East and West races on Flow. I would love to work pit road, like actually work pit road for an ARCA broadcast on FS1. I think that would be a ton of fun. Understanding that I've got other duties during those races that might make that a bit of a challenge. Yeah. I think that would be a ton of fun. I'm so fortunate. I've been the PA announcer at a place like Michigan and Eldora, doing these Flow broadcasts for the East and West races. I mean, already beyond my wildest dreams and expectations. I'm one of those lucky guys who is living his dream right now, Elijah.
It's pretty good. Last one is, and this is the hardest one to ask racing people because they have no time outside of racing, but what's your favorite hobby outside of racing?
Oh, playing golf with my kids. I love it. Golf is the ultimate test of patience, if you ask me. Racing people are not known for their patience, but watching my two sons, particularly my son Chase, who much like you, has really gotten into photography and graphic design here the last couple of years. Chase is not a kid that is like was born with a lot of natural athletic ability, but if he sets his mind to it, he practices, and watching him become a pretty decent golfer has been a lot of fun the last couple of years. So now, I don't want to admit this too publicly, but every now and then he'll take me to school out on the golf course, and it doesn't. I'm not like, oh man, I can't believe I'm losing to you. It's one of those things where it's like, wow, he is actually pretty good. I'd imagine, Randy, it's a lot like what you would feel when you would watch Elijah on the mound, pitching a game. Like you're just we're really fortunate, Randy. Guys like you and I have got to do some really cool things. Watching your kids do really cool things, it 10 times better. And watching those two kids have a good day on the golf course, to me, is so much fun. So much fun. And also, and I'm just I'll pull one of these down. Pardon the reach there, but this is something else I do for a little bit of fun, racing artwork. That's something that I really enjoy spending a little time doing. I don't get to do it near enough with my travel schedule, but sometime when I have a little more free time, I'm going to get back doing that on a more regular basis. And one of my other away from the racetrack hobbies.
That's pretty cool. That was a really good one. Was that Kurt's Daytona win?
Heck yeah.
Yeah. That was good. I'd love to see some more of your artwork. So
I'll share some pictures online.
I'll go back just as in terms of like parents watching their kids do cool things. I know that I can speak for the kids as well. We love hearing about the cool things our parents did. It's the best.
It goes both ways, doesn't it?
It goes both ways. It's a two-way street. Don't stop sharing the stories. Yeah, like I'll kind of echo what Dad said. Like, just thanks for coming on. Your enthusiasm for the sport is just awesome. Because like you've been in it for so long. I'm kind of newly involved in it. I grew up in it as an arm's length, but like I have like all of your enthusiasm. I have the same enthusiasm about it. Like it's just everything about racing is just so awesome. There's so much to celebrate, and you do a great job, and you have a good position where you can celebrate those things. And it goes so far from me growing up as a fan and hearing voices call races like you do, with so much excitement about it, just because of the purest form that it is. It goes a long way in growing fans and reaching lives that need sometimes an escape from their reality. They can lose themselves in racing a little bit. So, I can say that from experience. So what you do is appreciated, and thank you for coming on and sharing about it.
Well, I appreciate those kind words. I always tell people I'm perhaps not the greatest play-by-play guy to have ever done it, but I have a lot of fun doing it. And if I'm having fun, hopefully the people who are watching at home are having fun right there with me. I do want to tell you, Elijah, back in those early days of my career, the late 1990s, going to those truck races, I was a wide-eyed, I thought I knew everything, but was quickly learning that I didn't know anything about the actual business of the sport. But, we'd go out and, our driver, Terry Cook, was, he was a capable guy, and when he was in a race winning truck, he would go out and win some races. But at that point in the ThorSport team's existence, the team wasn't ready for that just yet. But it was always, I was always amazed, we would perhaps qualify really well and run up front in the top 10 the first half of the race, and old Randy in the impact number 25 would maybe start 18th or 20th, and lo and behold, lap 50 we were going backwards and he was going forwards, and I was always like, oh man, Tolsma's he's gonna take it to us again today, man. And I don't know how he did it, but Randy always found his way to the top 5. How did you do it, Randy? Why couldn't we do it and you could? I don't get it.
I was a horrible qualifier. I, for the life of me, could not give feedback for the one lap qualifying. Everything from in my bones was about the long run. And so I knew what I needed. And, if we did qualify up front, we were going to be bad fast, because, it wasn't just one lap. So yeah, it was always my way. And that's what I loved. I mean, I think I would have loved this era of don't practice, don't qualify, like figure out how to race it, and I know the cars don't adapt as well as they once did, but it was trying to find a different groove or watch somebody where they gained grip. At Monroe, it was 4 wheels off going into turn 4 underneath the white line. And only Hornaday and I would go down there, and there was so much grip there, and allowed me to, just dominate that race, and, that's what I loved about driving, is you had to figure it out. It wasn't just doing what you did. You had to change and what you did. And I always felt like that was probably one of my talents. And the other was just saving the equipment, not abusing anything, not burning off a right front or burning off a right rear, and just staying within it. And, especially when we did the halfway breaks, that was heaven for me. So
always just amazed me. Like, you and Andy Houston, did not matter if you guys backed it into the fence on lap 10. You guys always, at lap 190, you guys were in the mix. And it just always amazed me. It's like, how do they do it every week? Every week.
Awesome.
Well, hey guys, thank you for having me on. This was a blast. Anytime you want to get on and talk racing, I'd love to do it. You guys are awesome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. All right. Well, that signs us off. Episode 8 with Charles Krall, Fast Motor Podcast, every Wednesday. Spotify, YouTube, and interact on our socials. Comment, send me messages, questions, stuff you want us to talk about. If you guys have a topic that we haven't covered yet that you want to hear talked about, shoot me a message. I will always respond, and we'd love to involve you guys in the conversation. So see you guys next week.